Dear students, it is assumed that in economics, it is assumed that economic agents make the best choices given their objectives. A consumer is assumed to maximize utility given the prices of commodities and also his money income. Similarly, a producer is assumed to maximize his profits given the prices of factors of production and also the amount of money available with him to purchase factors of production, etc., etc. Now, the setting is made simple by assuming that in the case of a consumer, we consider a consumer in isolation. We consider a single consumer and we study how he maximizes his utility purchasing affordable bundles. So a consumer is considered in isolation. Also, it is based on the assumption that the consumer is a price taker. Consumer is so small that he cannot influence the market outcomes. He is a price taker. It is also assumed that the consumer is so small relative to the market that his actions will not have any measurable impact on other consumers. Measurable impact on other consumers. So the problem of maximization of a consumer in the economic theory is considered in this setting. A consumer is treated in isolation and it is assumed that he is a price taker and it is assumed that he is so small relative to the market such that his actions will not have any measurable impact on others. But this is a very simple setting. There are many situations in which, there are many situations which are much complicated than what is considered in the traditional theory. There are many situations which involve what is known as strategic behavior. Strategic behavior. There are many situations and many situations are so complicated in the sense that they involve strategic behavior. And as we have discussed in the previous classes, in the situations involving strategic behavior, what is best for one individual depends partly on what another person does. So, in situations involving strategic behavior, the best one can do depends partly on what others are also doing. Or what is best for me depends partly on what my competitor is doing. And game theory is the formal study of strategic behavior. Game theory is the formal study of strategic behavior. So, in economics, there are many situations involving strategic behavior. What is best for an economic agent depends on what other economic agents are doing. So, game theory is the study of strategic behavior. And strategic behavior involves any situation in which decision of competing individuals are mutually interdependent. Strategic behavior involves any situation in which decisions by competing individuals depends on, or decisions by competing individuals or group of individuals are mutually dependent. That is, my decision is not independent. My decision depends on the decision of other individuals. Also, a few examples involving strategic behavior. One example is how loud a student plays his musical instrument depends on how loud the students in the other room plays his musical instrument. A second example is a gas station's price depends on the price of gas charged by the next station. So, there are thousands of examples involving strategic interactions. And economics use separate tools to deal with the situations involving strategic behavior. So that is, the traditional economic tools cannot be used to analyze situations involving strategic behavior. That is the point. Now, our concern in this class and also in the subsequent classes is to study game theory in detail, and our study of game theory is very general, and the tools used to analyze situations involving strategic behavior, that is, the tools of game theory are very general, applying to diverse situations involving interaction of students in a hostel, players in a game of chess, war between nations, and interaction between oligopoly firms, etc., etc. And remember this, game theory has wide applications, not only in economics, but in many other fields involving strategic interactions between oligopoly firms, strategic trade between nations, war between nations, etc., etc. Now, before explaining the tools of game theory, we give a brief outline of the history of game theory. the history of game theory. The earliest attempt to analyze strategic behavior is attributed to Cournot. Attributed to Cournot, 1838, who attempted to explain interdependent production decisions by oligopolies. So this was the earliest attempt to analyze strategic behavior using the tools of game theory. And we have studied it in detail. The second was Bertrand. Bertrand, the year was 1888. We have also discussed in detail Bertrand's model of oligopoly, and the difference is in the Cournot model we have strategic interaction with respect to output. In the Bertrand model we have strategic interaction with the pricing, which is more realistic in the real world, as we have discussed in the previous classes. And it was extended by Chamberlain, 1933. The oligopoly model of Chamberlain, 1933. Stackelberg's 1934, and Poland CC, 1939, Poland CC, 1939. These are the earliest attempts to analyze strategic behavior. But their efforts to provide insights about strategic behavior was handicapped by the fact that they used traditional optimization techniques. They used traditional optimization techniques. The traditional tools of optimization was used that is for maximization of profit equate to MC to MR. That is what we see in all these models. Now, the modern game theory finds its origin in a classic work named Theory of Games and Economic Behavior by Morgenstern and Newman in 1944. Von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern in the classic Theory of Games and Economic Behavior. But the analysis by Morgenstern and Newman emphasized cooperation in strategic behavior. They emphasized cooperation in economic behavior. It was John Nash, the Princeton mathematician, believed that strategic behavior among economic agents are essentially rivalrous, not cooperative. Strategic behavior among economic agents are essentially rivalrous, not cooperative. Newman and Morgenstern believed that strategic interaction is essentially cooperative. It was John Nash in the 1950s provided insights about the case of strategic behavior as essentially as rivals. In such games, a rational player adopts a strategy that is the best response to strategies by rival firms. If the situations involving strategic interactions are rivalrous, as suggested by John Nash, then each player adopts a strategy that is the best response. The best response to the strategies adopted by the rivals. And the outcome of such a game in which each player, each firm, whatever it is, adopts its best strategy, the best response strategy. The outcome of such a best response strategy by the rivals is known as Nash Equilibrium. Nash Equilibrium, or the concept of equilibrium, is Nash Equilibrium in game theory. The concept of equilibrium used in the context of game theory is the concept of Nash equilibrium. So this is the history of attempts by economists to study what is known as situations involving strategic behavior. Situations involving strategic behavior. The earliest attempt is Cournot, but up to this, the problem was they used traditional tools. From the study by Newman and Morgenstern, John Nash used what is known as game theory approach to study situations involving strategic interactions. And the most important contribution in this field was by John Nash, and for his contribution he received a Nobel Prize also. And the concept of equilibrium, which is widely used in the context of game theory, is the concept of Nash equilibrium.